day, viewers. Welcome to today's episode on All About Africa. On our discussion today, we will be talking on an African country situated in the northern part of Africa named Morocco. Stay tuned. Morocco is a mountainous country situated in the northern part of Africa, which lies directly across the Strait of Gibraltar from Spain. The traditional domain of indigenous peoples now collectively known as Berbers. Morocco has been subject to extensive migration and has long been the location of urban communities that were originally settled by peoples from outside the region. Morocco's estimated population in the year 2018 is said to be 36,496,532, including the disputed Western Sahara. Its area is 710,850 square kilometers. Morocco claims the territory of Western Sahara, the political status of which is considered undetermined by the US government. Portions of the region's gold mine, Esmaoura and Laayoune Buju Sakia El Hamra as claimed by Morocco, lie within Western Sahara. Morocco also claims Oued Dahab La Guira, another region that falls entirely within Western Sahara. Its coast on the Atlantic Ocean moves past the Strait of Gibraltar to the Mediterranean Sea. Across the strait, Spain borders it to the north, Algeria borders it to the southeast, and Mediterranean to the south. The country has an elected parliament and is a constitutional monarchy. The king holds a number of executive powers, including the power to dissolve parliament. There are two houses of parliament, the Assembly of Councillors and the Assembly of Representatives. Recent elections for parliament were generally considered free and fair. Rabat is the capital city of Morocco, and Casablanca is the largest city in Morocco. The English name Morocco comes from the Spanish and Portuguese words referring to the former capital, Marrakesh. The country is still called Marrakesh in Persian, Urdu and Hindi. The Turkish word Fars comes from the ancient Marinid and Idrisid capital Fez. Now, the history of Morocco. Berber Morocco, as it's been widely said. Morocco has been inhabited since Neolithic times, where the area was less arid. The area resembled a savanna at that time. Various ethnic groups have contributed to Morocco in addition to the Berbers, including the Arabs, the Phoenicians, the Iberians, the Sephardic Jewish, and the Sub-Saharan Africans. The Romans and Berber Morocco. Early settlements and Phoenician trading colonies brought Morocco into the Mediterranean world. Mogador was a Phoenician colony as early as the 6th century BC. The area later formed an important part of the Roman Empire and was called Mauritanian Tingitana. When the Roman Empire declined in the 5th century, the area fell to the Vandals, Visigoths, and the Byzantine Empire in quick succession. Most of modern Morocco still not subdued and were still in Berber hands. Now, in the 17th century, Islamic expansion began in Morocco. The Arabs brought Islam and their language. Most Berbers converted. The Berber population asserted its independence after the Great Berber Revolt in 739. They formed states and kingdoms. The country cut ties with Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad under Idris ibn Abdallah. Fez became the Idrisid's capital. Morocco became a learning center and a regional power. Under a series of Berber dynasties after the 11th century, Morocco reached its height. Banu Hilal Arab tribes migrated to the area in the 13th century. With their arrival, urbanization fell and the country was becoming Arabized. Under several dynasties including the Maghrawa, the Almohads, the Almoravids, Marinids, Wattasids, and the Saadi, Morocco came to rule most of northwest Africa and large parts of the Liberia. Muslims and Jews fled to Morocco after the Iberian was reconquered. The Arab Alawite dynasty gained control after the Saadi when the area faced Spanish and Ottoman aggression. The kingdom under the Alawites was similar than prior kingdoms but wealthier. They annexed Tangier in 1684. Ismail ibn Sharif organized the kingdom into a unified state. In 1787, Morocco was the first nation to recognize the US. This allows US merchant ships to enjoy passage through areas subject to barbaric attacks under Moroccan protection. This Moroccan-American Treaty of Friendship is the oldest unbroken friendship treaty in the US. The European influences on Morocco. Morocco's art on the Mediterranean was not affected by the Portuguese invasion and control of the Atlantic coast in the 15th century. After the Napoleonic Wars, Istanbul could not effectively govern Egypt and North Africa. Morocco's strategic position and proven wealth led to the European interest. In 1904, the UK recognized France's influence in Morocco, to which the German Empire reacted. This crisis of 1905 was resolved at the Algeciras Conference in 1906. The Treaty of Fez in 1912 made Morocco a French protectorate. This treaty was allowed Spain. This treaty also allowed Spain to protect the Saharan zones that same year. In World War I and II, Moroccan soldiers were part of the French army. Many men also served in the Spanish Civil War as part of the Spanish Nationalist Army. The resistance. The French denied Moroccans basic rights during their rule. The French also built their own sections of the cities next to the existing slums. Under this apartheid system, Moroccans were not allowed to travel to the French sections. The education system also taught French art, history, and culture. Native languages and culture were disregarded. A young Moroccan intellectual class started a nationalist movement to restore Morocco to self-government. An independence party manifesto in 1944 was one of the first public demands for independence. Sultan Mohammed V's exile to Madagascar by the French in 1953 and his unpopular replacement, Mohammed Ben Harafa, provoked active opposition. In Hujah, Moroccans attacked European residents. In 1955, the Liberation Army began operations and the Arab Maghreb Liberation Committee met in Egypt as the resistance movement. The overall goal was Mohammed V's return and independence for Tunisia and Algeria. After the French allowed Mohammed V's return in 1955, independence talks began. Now, talking about the contemporary Morocco in 1956, Morocco earned political independence. Control of Spanish-ruled areas was restored through agreements in 1956 and 1958. Attempts to claim other areas through military action were unsuccessful. In 1956, the Tangier was reintegrated. In 1961, Hassan II became the king of Morocco. Political unrest occurred in his early years. In 1969, Ifni was reintegrated. Western Sahara was annexed in the 1970s, but the area's status is still unresolved up till today. In the 1990s, a bicameral legislature was formed. The country became a non-NATO ally in 2004 and has free trade agreements with the European Union and the United States. The European influences on Morocco. Morocco's art on the Mediterranean was not affected by the Portuguese invasion and control of the Atlantic coast in the 15th century. After the Napoleonic Wars, Istanbul could not effectively govern Egypt and North Africa. Morocco's strategic position and proven wealth led to the European interest. In 1904, the UK recognized France's influence in Morocco, to which the German Empire reacted. This crisis of 1905 was resolved at the Algeciras Conference in 1906. The Treaty of Fez in 1912 made Morocco a French protectorate. This treaty was allowed Spain. This treaty also allowed Spain to protect the Saharan zones that same year. In World War I and II, Moroccan soldiers were part of the French army. Many men also served in the Spanish Civil War as part of the Spanish Nationalist Army. The resistance. The French denied Moroccans basic rights during their rule. The French also built their own sections of the cities next to the existing slums. Under this apartheid system, Moroccans were not allowed to travel to the French sections. The education system also taught French art, history, and culture. Native languages and culture were disregarded. A young Moroccan intellectual class started a nationalist movement to restore Morocco to self-government. An independence party manifesto in 1944 was one of the first public demands for independence. Sultan Mohammed V's exile to Madagascar by the French in 1953 and his unpopular replacement, Mohammed Ben Harafa, provoked active opposition. In Hujah, Moroccans attacked European residents. In 1955, the Liberation Army began operations and the Arab Maghreb Liberation Committee met in Egypt as the resistance movement. The overall goal was Mohammed V's return and independence for Tunisia and Algeria. After the French allowed Mohammed V's return in 1955, independence talks began. Now, talking about the contemporary Morocco in 1956, Morocco earned political independence. Control of Spanish-ruled areas was restored through agreements in 1956 and 1958. Attempts to claim other areas through military action were unsuccessful. In 1956, the Tangier was reintegrated. In 1961, Hassan II became the king of Morocco. Political unrest occurred in his early years. In 1969, Ifni was reintegrated. Western Sahara was annexed in the 1970s, but the area's status is still unresolved up till today. In the 1990s, a bicameral legislature was formed. The country became a non-NATO ally in 2004 and has free trade agreements with the European Union and the United States. Now, the political history of Morocco. As stated, Morocco is a constitutionally monarch country. The parliament is elected. The opposition parties are permitted and several exist. The two chambers of parliament are the Assembly of Representatives of Morocco and the Assembly of Councillors. The constitution sets forth the monarchy, a parliament, and an independent judiciary. The king is the secular leader and a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. After legislative elections, the king appoints the prime minister. With the prime minister's recommendations, the king also appoints other government members. The king technically can terminate ministers, dissolve the parliament, and suspend the constitution, but these only happened in the year 1965. The king also commands the military in 1961. King Hassan II became king and ruled until he died in the year 1999. His son, King Mohammed VI, assumed the throne in the same year and continues to rule currently in 2021. In 1998, a coalition government was formed and headed by opposition socialist leader Abdurrahmane Youssoufi. This is the first government drawn from opposition parties in decades. This was also the first time in the Arab world that the opposition assumed power following an election. Since the 1996 reforms, there are two chambers to the legislature. There are 325 members in the Assembly of Representatives who are elected to 5-year terms. 270 members are in the Assembly of Councillors who are elected to 9-year terms. Parliament's powers are limited but were expanded in 1992 and 1996 constitutional revisions. A vote of no confidence from the lower chamber can dissolve the government. The Supreme Court is the highest court whose judges are appointed by the king. Reform programs have developed greater independence of the judiciary. Morocco has 16 administrative regions which were created in 1997. These are subdivided into 62 prefectures and provinces. There are 37 provinces and wilayas. The United Nations views Western Sahara as a case of unfinished decolonization. The international community does not recognize Morocco's rule to the territory. Similarly, the republic proposed by the Polisario is not recognized. The Polisario fought against Spanish rule and later for independence as the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. A ceasefire has been in place since 1991. Morocco administers this area as its southern provinces. The Polisario Front controls a free zone as the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. Morocco recently suggested the region have autonomous status. This was presented to the United Nations Security Council in 2007. While the US and France encouraged the proposal, it was not approved. Instead, the United Nations has requested the parties under direct negotiation to reach a political solution. Now, the geographical explanation on Morocco. Morocco's geography starts at the Atlantic Ocean and goes to mountainous areas, then to the Sahara. Mountains span a large part of Morocco, including the Atlas Mountains in the center and south. The Rif Mountains sit in the north. The Berber people are the main inhabitants of the mountains. The country's area is 446,519 square kilometers. The Canary Islands belong to Spain and are off the Atlantic coast. Madeira to the north is controlled by Portugal. The Strait of Gibraltar is to the north of Morocco. The Reef Mountains border the Mediterranean from the northwest to the northeast. The country's backbone is the Atlas Mountains, which run from southwest to northeast. The Sahara covers much of the southeast part of the country. The Western Sahara is in the south. Rabat is the capital, while Casablanca is the largest city and main port. Now, the Morocco climate. In the north and some of the mountains, there is a Mediterranean climate. These areas are the locations of most of the country's agriculture. 12% of Morocco is forested and arable land is 18%. Different climates exist in the Atlas Mountains, including Mediterranean and maritime temperate. On the eastern side of the Atlas Mountains, the shelter effect of the mountains changes the climate. It is very dry and warm in the summer with a desert climate. The economy of Morocco. Morocco's economic freedom score is 62.9, making its economy the 75th freest in the 2019 index. Its overall score has increased by 1.0 points with improvements in fiscal health, property rights, and a judicial effectiveness outpacing lower scores for government integrity, labor freedom, and trade freedom. Morocco is ranked 6th among 14 countries in the Middle East and North African region, and its overall score is above the regional and world averages. Low labor cost and proximity to Europe have helped Morocco to build a diversified and market-oriented economy. The government is taking additional fiscal consolidation measures to boost growth and improve private sector competitiveness by strengthening public finances and introducing a more flexible exchange rate regime. A large part of the labor force remains marginalized by inflexible labor laws, and the government has yet to confront other long-standing challenges that require deeper reforms, particularly in connection with ensuring the exchanged rule of law. The demographics of Morocco. Morocco's population is the Arab world's fourth highest. Most practice Sunni Islam. Arabs and Berbers are 99% of the population. There are populations of Haratin and Nawa, black or mixed race. Most of the foreign residents are French or Spanish. Genetic studies. Genetic studies have shown Moroccans are genetically closer to Iberians than those of Bantu ethnicity. France has the largest Moroccan population outside of Morocco at over 1 million. Most people live west of the Atlas Mountains, where the country is insulated from the Sahara. The languages of the Moroccans. The official language in modern Standard Arabic and its distinctive dialect is Moroccan Arabic. 60% speak Berber, either as a first language or with Arabic. French is the unofficial second language and is universally taught. It is the commercial language and is used in education and government. In the north, 2 million speak Spanish. English is not widely spoken, but is becoming a second language of the educated youth. Berber is the oldest known native Moroccan language and has an unknown number of speakers. There are three main varieties: the Tamazight Tarafit, the Tamazight of the Atlas, and the Tamazight Tashialit. In addition to rural areas, there are sizable Berber-speaking populations in the urban areas. Now, moving on to the culture of Morocco. Morocco has a rich culture and civilization, mostly due to its ethnic diversity. The different civilizations in the region's history have impacted Moroccan social structures. There are regional differences that contribute to the overall culture. The country has protection of the diversity as one of its top priorities. Now, the cuisine. Morocco's cuisine is one of the world's most diversified. It mixes Berbers, Corsican, Portuguese, Spanish, Moorish, Middle Eastern, African, and Mediterranean. Spices are used extensively, which were imported into the country over thousands of years. Chicken is the most widely eaten meat, and beef is the most common red meat. Lamb is expensive but preferred. Couscous. The most famous dish in Morocco is couscous. Now, the music aspect of the Moroccans. The country's music is of sub-Saharan and Berber origin. Chabi bands and trance musics are widespread. Andalusian classical music is based on Morocco and found in North Africa. This likely originated in Cordoba under the Moors. Chabi descends from folk music and is played at meetings and celebrations. The literature life of the Moroccans. Most literature is in Arabic, Berber, and French. During the Almohad dynasty, the country experienced a period of learning. The Marrakesh Kutubia Mosque accommodated 25,000 people but also had books and manuscripts. Abu Yaqub and Almohad Caliph founded a great library. Modern national literature started in the 1930s due to the ability of the intellectuals to exchange work with Arabs and Europeans. Foreign writers and native ones thrived in the 1950s and 1960s. Oral literature is also important in the country's culture. The transport system in Morocco. There are 2,067 kilometers of railways in Morocco, which connects to Algeria and Tunisia. These Tunisian connections have been closed since the 1990s. A railway between Spain and Morocco is proposed to go under the Strait of Gibraltar. Plans are also in place for high-speed rails. 56,395 kilometers of roads, of which 6,105 kilometers are highways, are present in Morocco. The military system of Moroccans. Since 2006, compulsory military service has been suppressed. The reserve obligation lasts until age 50. There is an army, navy, and air force, of which the army is the largest. There are also the National Police Force, the Royal Gendarmerie, and auxiliary forces. There is effective international security. A AUN observer force is present in the Western Sahara. The Polisario Militia fought the Moroccan army intermittently in the area since the 1980s. The education life of the Moroccans. Education in Morocco is compulsory through to age 15 and free. Notwithstanding this, many children in rural areas, especially girls, fail to attend. Those who do often drop out before they reach secondary school level, and there are shocking gaps in literacy because of these unfortunate trends. The primary school program is designed to last 6 years. Average dropout rates for boys and girls approximate 21%. The sports life of the Moroccans. Football is the most popular sport in Morocco. In 1970, the country was the first African nation to play in the World Cup. However, they did not qualify for the latest 2014 World Cup in Brazil. National athletics have also won Olympic medals in track and field. Tennis and golf have also become popular in the city of Morocco. Thank you all for listening. You can find more about Morocco political life, economic life, musical life, and educational life on Britannica. Thank you all. Don't forget to like, subscribe onto our YouTube channel. Thank you.